Hello, lovelies. As you can see, the holiday season is finally upon us, which I could not be more excited about personally. And all month long, we are going to be sharing some really fun recipes to help make your holiday entertaining, easy but impressive. That's our theme. Obviously, the holidays mean a lot of entertaining, but you don't want to spend a ton of time in the kitchen when you could be spending time with your loved ones. So today, we're kicking things off with 5 easy but impressive appetizers that will wow your guests, but are really simple to put together. First up, we have this blackberry baked brie. How incredible does that sound? This dish is a total showstopper, but you won't believe how easy it is to make. So of course, this beautiful blackberry baked brie starts with some brie. I'm going to go ahead and use a serrated knife to cut the top rind off. Now, this is going to end up being a very sort of rustic dish, so there's no wrong way. To be clear, this is still perfectly edible, so you can go ahead and eat it if you want to, but it's this that we're looking for. Just going to place this on a parchment lined baking sheet and then get it into the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for between 8 and 10 minutes. In the meantime, while our brie is baking, we are going to turn our attention to our blackberry topping. This, of course, starts with some beautiful blackberries. Look how plump and juicy and gorgeous these are. We're going to get those into a saucepan over medium heat. Next, I'm going to add the juice of 1 lemon, some honey for sweetness since blackberries themselves can be quite tart. And finally, I'm going to add some freshly chopped rosemary. Rosemary and blackberries really are so complementary. I'm going to let this simmer away over medium heat for between 8 and 10 minutes. The idea here is we want those blackberries to sort of burst and become nice and syrupy and delicious, almost with like a jam consistency. Then we will pull our brie out of the oven, arrange it on a nice serving platter, and pile on this tasty blackberry topping. To make it extra impressive, I'm going to be adding a few fresh blackberries, as well as some toasted pecans and some fresh rosemary. Your guests are sure to think that you are the most brilliant host with this offering. Next, we've got some really savory and satisfying stuffed mushrooms. I love serving stuffed mushrooms because they look really elegant, but they're, once again, pretty effortless to prepare. They start, as most of my favorite recipes do, with some melted butter in a cast iron skillet. As you can see, I have removed the stems from my mushrooms. That's really important because obviously this is the reservoir into which we are going to put all this tasty stuffing. I took those stems and then finally chopped them. So that's what you see here. And we're basically going to be cooking these in all this buttery goodness. We're going to cook those up for 4 to 5 minutes just until they start to become golden. And then we are going to build in some flavor with some minced garlic, some freshly chopped parsley, and some fresh thyme leaves. Now that this has become wonderfully fragrant, in goes our cream cheese. Now you also have the option to use goat cheese in this recipe. What you're really looking to do is to balance out all the earthiness of those mushrooms with something nice and tangy, and both goat cheese and cream cheese do that really, really well. We're going to cook this over medium heat, stirring it constantly until that cream cheese has sort of melted and everything starts to become nice and smooth. And then we can remove this mixture from the heat, transfer it to a bowl, and set to work on stuffing our mushroom caps. Now, to bake these mushroom caps, I'm going to be using the very same skillet because, of course, fewer dishes are always better, but you could do this in a baking dish instead. Basically, I am just going to spoon my cream cheese mixture into the center of my mushroom cap and then arrange it in my skillet. Do not be afraid to overstuff. I've never seen someone come back and say, you know what, there was just too much delicious cream cheese and garlic mixture in those mushrooms. Once you've got all of your lovely mushroom caps stuffed, you can top this with a little bit of freshly grated Parmesan and then get them into the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for between 15 and 20 minutes. You really just want to make sure those mushrooms have had a chance to soften up and you get a nice golden sort of crust on top with that Parmesan. I like to finish these off with a little sprinkle of thyme, and oh my gosh, these were incredible. And I can honestly say the team and I had the entire plateful polished off in probably less than 15 minutes. So just imagine what your guests are gonna think. You're welcome. Next, for something really beautiful and seasonal and the perfect addition to any gorgeous cheese board, we are making some roasted grape and goat cheese crostini. How incredible does that sound? Of course, this all starts by roasting some grapes. I'm using these beautiful red grapes. They are just bursting as it is. I'm just going to transfer them into a baking dish, and then I'm going to add a few sprigs of rosemary to the dish. This is just going to help infuse them with a little bit of that beautiful seasonal flavor. I'm going to get these into the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for between 30 and 40 minutes. They do take a while to break down and get nice and soft and roasted, but your patience will definitely be rewarded in each and every bite. In the meantime, you can work on making your crostini. If you've never made crostini, it is really simple. I've just simply cut some baguette, and I'm just going to drizzle on a little bit of olive oil to each piece. Then I'm going to sprinkle these with a little salt. We'll get these into the oven for maybe 6 to 8 minutes, just until they start to become golden and a little crispy on the edges, and then you can remove them and let them cool completely. The reason I like to let the crostini cool completely is because our next step is going to be spreading on our goat cheese, and I find if your crostini is too warm, your goat cheese sort of melts and it's not a good scene. If you're not into goat cheese, you can always swap in some cream cheese in this recipe. That will work just as well, no problem at all. Then we are going to finish them off by topping them with our beautiful roasted grapes. And as if these weren't delicious enough already, I think it's a good idea to top them off with some beautiful toasted pistachios that have been crushed. And I am a sucker for a little drizzle of honey on pretty much everything, so I'm gonna go for it. Merry Christmas. How grape do you think these taste? For another easy but impressive appetizer, I am making these incredibly festive meatballs that are actually inspired by the flavors of a turkey dinner. The most exciting part about these meatballs, I think, is that instead of using breadcrumbs like in traditional meatballs, we are actually going to be using some store-bought stuffing mix. I've got that in my bowl, and to that I'm going to add some milk. We're going to let this all hang out for about 5 minutes or so, or until that mixture has absorbed all of that milk. Then we can build in the rest of our flavor. So I'm going to be adding some ground turkey. I'm also going to add an egg, which is going to help bind everything together, and some classic stuffing herbs like sage and thyme. We're going to hit this with some salt and pepper, of course. Give it all a quick mix. And to add a little more festive flair and a bit of sweetness to these, I'm also adding some cranberry sauce. Now, store-bought, of course, is always an option, but if you want to go ahead and make your own cranberry sauce, I've got a recipe for that. I'll link it in the description box below. We're going to mix this all together until it's really nicely combined, and then we are going to roll these into balls, place them on a parchment-lined baking sheet, and get them into the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for between 20 and 25 minutes, or until they are nice and golden on the outside and reach a safe internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes, this is a job for a meat thermometer. Ask Santa for one. I'm sure he'd be happy to bring you one. When they come out of the oven, they are already delicious and loaded with holiday flavor. But if you want to make them even more delicious, I suggest brushing them with a little more cranberry sauce and then serving them with a side of cranberry sauce for dipping. Because you know, when it comes to appetizers, everybody loves a little dip. Finally, on our easy but impressive appetizer extravaganza, we are making these adorable pear and blue cheese cups using one of my very favorite cheating ingredients, puff pastry. Now, when it comes to easy but impressive appetizers, nothing thrills more than puff pastry. You get so much bang for your buck. This is how a sheet of puff pastry usually comes. You find it in your freezer section and then thaw it out and roll it out onto a board like so. I'm going to use a pizza cutter to cut the dough into squares. I've got a well-greased muffin tin standing by, and I'm simply going to place one of my puff pastry squares into each one of the muffin cups. At this point, it is a very good idea to brush each piece of puff pastry dough with a little bit of egg wash, which is just an egg that's been beaten up. And then we can turn our attention to our pears. In this case, I am using some lovely Bosque pears, but any pear will do. I just used a sharp knife to remove the core from my pears and then cut them into spears. Now you can definitely cut these into any shape you like, but I thought that these made for a really beautiful and dramatic presentation. And then I'm going to get them into the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about 15 to 20 minutes or so, or until my pears have become nice and soft and my puff pastry has become golden. And then I'm going to top them with some crumbled blue cheese and some chopped walnuts. Back into the oven these go for another 3 to 4 minutes, or just until that blue cheese becomes nice and melted and gorgeous. I like finishing them off with a little drizzle of honey for that salty sweetness, and we have a happy appy for everybody. And there you have it, lovelies. 5 easy but impressive appetizers that will definitely make you look like a hostess with the mostest this holiday season. If you do give any of these a try, be sure to tweet me, Instagram me, or Snapchat me a photo, because I love seeing your kitchen creations. Keep in mind, I will be back in the next few weeks with even more great, easy but impressive entertaining ideas. And finally, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, because there's lots more holiday deliciousness where this came from.